Good morning. My name is Sheila Lamb, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 26 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one advising services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, Making the Most of Distribution with the Virginia Wine Distribution Company, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted and the chat feature is turned off. But if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your own meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the Virginia SBDC Craft Beverage Assistance Program Manager, Chris Van Orden.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this conversation about the Virginia Wine Distribution Company. I'm going to use the term VWDC here on out just because it's a mouthful otherwise. As Sheila said, my name is Chris Van Orden, and I serve as the manager of the Craft Beverage Assistance Program at the Virginia SBDC at George Mason. So today's program will be a free-flowing discussion about the options available to Virginia wineries under the VWDC. You can enter any questions that you have in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer them all either during or after the webinar. So I'm excited to welcome today's speaker, Staci Saunders, who serves as the VWDC's Operations Manager. Welcome, Staci.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Staci Saunders. I've been the operations manager for Virginia Winery Distribution Company since April of 2022. Prior to this, my experience has been focused on operations, sales support, and management in the audiovisual technology industry. This role's by far been the most rewarding because I'm able to see directly how this service affects those who use it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and I'm excited to kind of share more about what you do. So, to start off, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the VWDC and how it's structured?
Sure. The Virginia Winery Distribution, VWDC, was established in 2007 by the Virginia General Assembly. It is a non-stock, nonprofit corporation housed under the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. The primary goal of VWDC is to provide the wholesale wine distribution services for licensed Virginia wineries and farm wineries. It's managed by a board of directors. That board consists of 2 representatives nominated by the Virginia Wine Wholesalers Association, 2 representatives nominated by the Virginia Wineries Association, and the commissioner of VDACS. This diversity in the board helps to ensure that both wholesalers and wineries are represented equally in all decisions that are made.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so, right, it's helpful for folks to know, like, you're not quite a government agency, but it's right. This is what people talk about when they talk about kind of Virginia wineries, self-distribution rights, that kind of thing. This is what they mean, and we're going to walk through what it looks like in in practice. So, in a broad sense, how does the VWC work when you're talking about a company engaging with this? It's often positioned as a self-distribution mechanism. Is that an accurate way or a helpful way to think about it?
It's often referred to as self-distribution because the wineries do all of the heavy lifting. The VWDC provides an online platform that serves as the distribution component required by the three-tier distribution model required in Virginia. The online platform is accessible 24/7. It allows the wineries to place and track their orders. But they handle the sales process, the logistics, the relationship. They process orders, deliver the wine. VWDC provides this platform. So that's why it's referred to as self-distribution.
Sure, sure. So yes, this platform is the mechanism by which Virginia wineries can take these orders, get them associated, and make those sales. But
Yeah.
the VWDC is involved, and there's payment kind of mechanisms that are associated with that too. Is that correct?
That's correct. The sales flow through the system, the winery collects the payment. If it's a check, there's also some electronic options that are available. All payments come to the VWDC. And I reconcile all of those sales at the end of the month and hold back ABC taxes and VWDC fees and pay the wineries once a month for all completed transactions.
Okay. And if I'm not mistaken, you prefer the online payments as the preferred method, but of course, checks are still permissible.
That's true. Yes. Yeah, there's the mail service presents a challenge that is unpredictable. So we definitely do prefer either fintech or an ACH transaction.
Sure. Yes, I can imagine it just means that everything gets done more efficiently. If you're doing once a month transactions, a check coming in a little sooner means everybody's a little bit happier. So
Yes, we're able to pay the wineries a lot quicker. If a delivery is made at the last day of the month, they pick up a check. I
mhm.
don't get that check until midway through the next month, delaying their payment even further. So
Right. Right. Yeah. So trying to avoid that as much as possible makes sense. And you mentioned the fees that the VWDC has. So what does that look like? Because otherwise the method that they would be able to make these sales would be through distributors.
Comparatively speaking, it's much, much less than the larger distributors. The VWDC collects for each transaction $6 plus 1% of the total order, which
Right.
is considerably lower. So I hear.
Yes, yes. And there's kind of benchmarks that are out there, but whatever you think about your traditional markups that would be out there, this is
Yes.
nice. And I know that I don't mean to kind of go through bit by bit here, but just in terms of the volume that a winery, and I should say cideries fall under this as well, correct? Or
Yes. And meaderies, actually.
yes, okay.
With the
Uh,
wine.
so we're not talking about spirits, which go through your ABC store, totally different mechanism. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to be speaking with the Virginia Beer Distribution Company, which is sort of Staci's sister organization that which is a younger organization and it is getting set up now. But for those folks, right, if you're talking about volumes that they're permitted to sell through VWDC in a year, what does that look like?
Wineries are allowed to distribute 3,000 cases per year, and that's based on a 9-liter case
Hmm.
per
Okay.
year, per calendar year.
Per calendar year. Great.
Yeah.
That's it, all the wineries that are listening in, you could think about the volumes that you're producing in a given year. How does that fit into it? I mean, obviously many wineries in Virginia are quite small, so we're talking about a significant proportion of annual production. So that's helpful.
Yes.
So hopefully those who are already producing are taking advantage of some of these things. If they are not, hopefully you are considering it. Um, we had a quick question that came in about that mechanism, since we're talking about the payments. How do we set up a purchase using ACH? Is it under the mobile payment method? They don't see it in the portal. What does that look like for setting up an ACH payment?
The retailer must log in under their login and go under administration and manage ACH payments, and they will need to add their banking information in that portal under their login. And then it takes a couple of days. There has to be a bank test that goes back and forth to ensure that everything's correct. And then once that's in place and approved, that will be their default payment method. So it's not something that the winery can do on behalf of the retailer. The retailer has to take care of that part.
Okay, good. Thank you. And we can certainly talk about the sort of mechanics of some of these as we go through the steps here. But I wanted to start off, right, say if for those of the companies that are listening and that maybe are not yet using VWDC, right? Maybe you're selling exclusively through the tasting room. You have a number of local accounts that would like your product, but you haven't found a distributor to service them. So they say, maybe VWC is the right fit for me. can you kind of walk through exactly what eligibility criteria looks like and then talk about registration?
Sure. Any winery, farm, or commercial with an active ABC license is eligible to become a member of the VWDC. The first step is to register at VWDC.org, register as a winery. There's a form that they need to fill out, including their ABC number. And then once that comes through, then I will email a list of requirements along with a payment milestone schedule. And once all those documents have received back, and I'll go through what they all are, then I submit an application to ABC. And this process, the entire process typically takes 45 to 60 days. That depends on how quickly I get all of the documents back that I need to submit an application. The list of required documents are, there's a signed operating agreement between the VWDC and the winery. And within that operating agreement, they will include a list of people that they are designating as agents of VWDC. So those are anybody that they employ that handles any part of the transaction. They'll also need to submit a franchise designation form. And this is a document, it's an ABC document that requires them to identify every county and independent city in Virginia where they plan to use VWDC as their distributor. They will need to include a drawing of their property and the building where they have a VWDC space. So since I'm the only employee of VWDC, there's no warehouse, there's no trucks. So that requires, to have a license at their winery, it requires us to designate a space within their licensed space that's essentially our warehouse. And so part of this application process is they need to show where that's located on the property. I always tell folks, pretend the ABC agent is coming to do an inspection and you're not there. They should be able to use this map to find that space and put their eyes on it. It has to be lockable. It has to be completely separate from anything else. And it has to be big enough to hold their largest order that they plan to distribute physically.
Singular order, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And then they'll need to provide a picture. So not only a drawing of where it is on the property, but I'll need a picture of that showing that it's a lockable space. I need their local newspaper. VWDC will run an ad. It's part of the required process for ABC to run an ad for 2 consecutive weeks. It gives the public 30 days to object. And a TTB amendment. If the space that they've chosen is within their registered TTB space, they'll need to amend that with TTB to kind of carve that out and show that it's leased to VWDC.
Okay.
So once all of that documentation comes in, then I start the process. There's a 2-part application process with ABC. The first part is paying the application fee and submitting our initial application. And then the second part takes place after the posting and publishing has taken place, and we pay the license fee. And then the ABC inspector will come out and review their space, where it is, make sure it meets all the criteria, and then the license is issued.
Okay. So, right, the designation of the agents, these are just people that are on staff that are going to be somehow involved in the transactions. So if you just identify these people and make sure that they are actually employed by the organization, that it's, fully above board. And then it's really about just the forms and the space. So like the space could be like a large lockable closet, if that's the largest order you're going to fulfill, or you can have like a kind of like a locked in, chained in space that would be, I'm thinking of a chain link fence.
Yeah,
that could
it could even be a dog crate. It sounds funny, but a lot of the wineries use a dog crate, the largest one you can find, and they put like a little, combination lock on it that satisfies the requirement to be separate and locked and large enough.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So that doesn't sound like it's too onerous a process. Obviously, just working through it with you, and you've done it enough times now that you it's very evident what the right thing is to do here. This is not, something that hasn't been figured out yet. So it seems like a
Correct.
pretty established process. Okay. We had a question come in about whether or not multiple accounts are allowed. For example, one for wine, one for cider. They're two different DBAs, but it sounds like registered under the same business entity.
There has to be a separate VWDC account for each ABC license. So if there are separate licenses, then there would need to be separate VWDC licenses.
So it's got to do with the VWDC rights, and the sort of accounts that are opened up are based on the ABC license. So if you have more than one ABC license, you have to do two. If you only have one ABC license, you can't open up multiple. Just as for instance, if you're talking about, well, I want to have a higher cap for my self-distribution rights, it would have to do with the larger sense. Are these separate companies, or are they two brands or two DBAs under the same business entity, license entity? Okay, that is helpful. Great. Okay, so let's say a company goes through, they get all the paperwork done, they're fully registered with VWDC, and now it comes down to exercising the rights afforded under VWDC. So how do they go about receiving and fulfilling orders? How do they do it properly? You mentioned the platform, and just in practice, what does that look like?
So the first step that they'll need to do when a license is issued is to load their products to the catalog. And they have to have an approved ABC label code issued for a product to be loaded. And then once their active products are listed there, all of the retailers that are physically located in the counties they designated on their franchise designation form will be able to view their catalog and place orders. When an order is placed by a retailer, the winery receives a notification, an email notification that they have a new order. And so they will confirm that they have stock to fill the order, and then they'll reach out to that retailer to arrange for delivery. A little side note there, the wineries can also enter that order on behalf of the retailer. So a lot of the times that's what takes place because it's their relationship and they're trying to take the administrative burden off of the retailer. So they do have the ability to log in and place that order on behalf of them. So once the order's in, they've confirmed they have stock, they've arranged delivery, they'll prepare the necessary paperwork. There's a purchase order that has to be printed and signed, and that transfers ownership to VWDC. And then there's the invoice. And so they will pull the wine from their inventory and put it in the VWDC space where, according to the code, it has to come to rest. And then they'll take it out for delivery. They'll, or, a retailer can pick it up. It doesn't always have to be delivered. But during the delivery, if the default payment method is COD, the winery will pick up a check, have all the paperwork signed, and then when they get back to the winery, they'll mail that check in to VWDC and if they have paper copies, put all those stored copies in their VWD documentation area. And then update the order to delivered in the system. For transactions where FinTech or ACH are the payment methods, that's the trigger for that payment to take place when the order is updated to a delivered status. So that usually comes in within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay. Yeah. So I could see that being an easier step. It's not about sending checks and waiting to be reimbursed. This is
very much so
automatic. So you mentioned the product has to come to rest in this designated space. We're talking about, right, if somebody places an order, you put it in the space, you close and lock it. You can wait a minute and take it back out. That satisfies that requirement?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Yes, but it just needs to be put in there.
It just needs to go through that space before it goes out the door.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And in the portal, is it you mentioned registering products to make them available? Is it a matter of keeping inventory updated in there, or is it just listing a product as like you can delist a product if you run out of stock or if you're reserving the rest of your stock for, direct to consumer
Mhm.
in-house sales or
If They
whatever?
have, they have the autonomy to deactivate and activate products as often as they wish. The system does not keep an inventory. It requires them to enter an inventory, but it doesn't keep up with the inventory. So that is a feature that we're probably going to do away with. But yeah, the pricing is completely up to the winery. It's based on all of their costs associated with this process. So it's up to them. I will say it's an ABC regulation for the pricing aspect of it. If they increase the price, there is a 30-day waiting period. And so the system automatically starts the clock on that. They can still make sales at the current price, but the increased price will not take effect until 30 days after it's entered. Price decreases are effective immediately.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know for folks if they're planning a year-over-year increase, right?
Yes.
This time of year, you might be seeing people rolling out. I mean, obviously, you might have a different product entry if you have, let's say, the same wine, Cabernet Sauvignon, you might list a 2021 separate from a 2022. But if you have, a blend that you don't put a vintage on, and if you're using the same one, but you're going to increase the price, well, you might want to get started on that even before you're really so I guess a question would be, and this is just gaming things out with you right now. If somebody wants to increase the price for a product, but they want it to take effect immediately when it becomes saleable, so they could register that product today, increase the price, and then delist it, waiting for that 30-day clock to run out, or does that product need to remain listed for the full 30 days?
I believe the clock is still running on a deactivated product.
Okay. Just thinking about, yes, I mean,
Yeah, no, that's a
if
great
you
question.
since we're dealing with people that are putting out, a lot of products that, this year's vintage becoming available, if it's a strategy question, just so that you don't wind up having a little bit of back and forth
Yeah.
with your clients. So, okay. Um, that is helpful. So, I mean, I'm sure that in practice, lots of the companies that you work with have questions about how to make the system make sure that they're in compliance, that it works with the systems, that everybody's happy. And like you mentioned, one of the things for doing that is that there's an option for um, producers to work with retailers and help facilitate those sales by entering the information for them for that order. They can basically generate the purchase order that they then respond to. What does that look like? And I guess, have you heard of companies that have even helped retailers set up their own accounts, get comfortable with it, so that if they want to carry other products, what does that look like in practice, the sort of retailer producer relationship?
I mentioned earlier, it is, the wineries do all of the heavy lifting. It's very common for a winery to go to the retailer site and sit down with them at their laptop and enter the registration process, help them to navigate the ordering process. And then I'm always there as a backup. If time doesn't suit them, don't have any problem helping retailers navigate the system and figuring out how to jump in and do what they need to do. But it is quite often the winery is hand holding the retailers through the system.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it's good to know that, if a retailer says, "Oh, I don't know how to work VWDC," the conversation doesn't need to end there. It could say,
Right.
"Hey, I can help you with this." Maybe they get comfortable enough that they can manage their own account in there eventually, but there is a solution so that you're not just out of luck because, a small retailer or restaurant doesn't want to have to deal with a new system.
Correct.
They all have plenty of portals that they need to manage themselves. So, no.
You froze.
Yes, I think I'm back now. Uh-oh.
It looks like Stacy might be frozen now. Chris, are you back? Okay,
Hello?
there. You're good. Chris? Now Chris is frozen again.
Mhm.
Gotta love Zoom, right?
Love it.
Maybe Chris can drop his next question to you down in the chat. And we can move on. Chris, you might want to try, if you can hear us, you might want
Can
to
you
try
hear me now?
backing out. There you go. I hear you. Let's see.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries, you're
Okay.
back. You're both
You're
back.
back.
We'll
The internet
continue.
connection has been
All good.
a little dicey here.
Okay.
So I apologize about that. Stacy, you were saying, yeah, we were just talking about the relationship there. There was a question that came in about this sort of about what Provi is, Provi, and how it interfaces with VWDC. Do you have experience with Provi and how that relates to?
Yes, Provi was in place. It was 750 is what it was prior, and then I think Provi purchased 750. It is an online platform that we used to interface with. We severed that like earlier last year, just mostly because the cost was quite high. And we did not receive, we weren't getting a lot of exposure and a lot of orders that came out of it. And when Provi purchased 750, there was a lot of confusion over the product entries and, with the franchise designation, there are some wineries that use VWDC just right around their winery, and then they use a different distributor for the rest of the state. There's no way to designate that within Provi, and so there was a lot of confusion created there. So given the cost and the return on investment, it just wasn't a good use of our funds.
Okay. So for the producers that are listening in here now, it's basically not something that is currently supported with or interfacing with VWDC. It still exists out in the wider world, but it's a
Yes.
sales platform that is distinct.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we've touched on this already a couple of times, but I just want to make sure we walk all the way through here. If a winery does make a sale via VWDC, whether it's a sale that they themselves generated the PO for, or it could just be, hey, there's a retailer in my area in one of the counties that I've designated that wants to carry my product now. So right, they go about filling that order. Are there any responsibilities that we didn't touch on that are the responsibility of the producer, or things that they need to give you in order to make sure that VWDC's steps are fully covered?
The winery is, as long as they add their products to the site, they need to stay on top of reviewing and accepting the orders, fulfilling and delivering and updating the status of the orders. That's a very important part of the process. Making sure that they are capturing the signatures. That's Virginia ABC requirement that all of the invoices must be signed, and collecting the payment. I think that's one of the struggles that some of the wineries have, is understanding how this particular retailer pays VWDC. Is it a check? Is it FinTech or ACH? So that can kind of present some confusion sometimes during the delivery.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound too, and if they execute all of that, then it goes over to you and your process starts, and then it's just going about reconciling everything, and then the monthly payments go out
Yes.
each month.
Yeah. At the end of the month, I'd run reports and reconcile all of the payments that were received for all of the orders, and calculate the ABC taxes and the VWDC fees and deduct those and pay the winery the difference.
That doesn't sound too complicated. That's great. I wanted to circle back to one point that we talked about earlier and just make sure that we're clear about why this is a place. The designation of the areas that are going to be covered under VWDC. So a producer, right? It's not just the entirety of Virginia. They have to activate, you said, at the county level, correct?
Correct.
So, right,
And
the
choose
idea
the whole state.
they could, yeah,
Sorry.
there's nothing that would stop them per se. However, obviously, if you're based in, let's say, Northern Virginia, you may not want to go and run, a mixed case to Bristol, let's say. That's just not worth the sale. That's not necessarily a good return on investment for that particular sale. And it also relates to potentially with distributor agreements. If a company's being distributed by like an independent distributor, you know, you may have a relationship where you may not be able to serve that region.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
So in your experience, you have, you know, users of VWDC that may self-deliver in their own backyard. Let's say they're in Charlottesville. They activate, they do use VWDC for their immediate counties, but they would use a third-party distributor for Richmond, you know, Newport News, and Northern Virginia. Is that
Yes,
that's
exactly.
common? Okay.
Very common. Yes.
That's great. So first, yeah, some of the companies that maybe have been using VWDC, they're getting conversations going with the distributors. Just make sure you understand how you're managing your separate territories, that you have you've thought through all the eventualities of what's good for you, right? If you're going to sign on or give somebody rights in that territory, how does that relate to your self-distribution, knowing you know, the difference between margins and volumes and all that. It's not just a single right answer here, but hopefully the people that are growing are thinking about how this all adds up.
Yes.
Great. Well, those are some of the positive things, right? If it works well, it's part of a big beneficial strategy that kind of unfurls over time if they're, you know, starting with direct-to-consumer sales, some limited self-distribution in the backyard, maybe then working with distributors to cover more of the state or out of state, right? That's a path for growth for people. But I'm sure there are companies, I mean, you probably every day hear from people about, right, that things not working perfectly. So what are some of the more common snags that wineries encounter when using VWDC?
Probably, I notice a lot of situations revolving around the products. You know, we are comparing every entry, we are cross-referencing to ABC. So when they have an approved label code through ABC, the name that they enter into the VWDC system must align, or else our tax reports are, you know, there's a back and forth with us and ABC. So I think that that's one of the very important snags that folks don't always understand. They like to give wines little nicknames and things like that, but the name in there has to include what they've put in the ABC label code. Sometimes they forget to update the order to delivered. And while if it's a check payment, it's not as big of a deal, but if it's FinTech or ACH, that payment is not even on its way until it's updated to delivered. And so that's often a thing that wineries forget to do.
Yeah.
And I mentioned earlier, you know, not being aware of the retailer's payment method. So it's clearly identified on the order screen, but it's just, I think they go into autopilot and they, you know, just enter in the order and forget to look at that cell. So it's very important that they know whether or not they need to pick up a check during this delivery.
Yeah, I can imagine that's happened before where somebody designated check and then they have to run back out there or wait for the check to be mailed or whatever, and it just slows up the process.
Yes. And it is ABC, it's a requirement that payment is made at delivery. So that, you know, that can get us into some trouble too if we're not picking up a payment until a week later. And then I probably, you know, outstanding orders. There are the mail, the United States Postal Service, and I, you know, don't mean to talk badly about the mail
Mhm.
service, but it's the pain source of a lot of the old outstanding orders in our system. They've picked up a check, mailed it in, and it could take 2 days, it could take 3 weeks, it could never arrive, never to be seen again. So that creates a different level of oversight that myself and the wineries are responsible for making sure that the payments are received. And then, you know, then they'll have to call the retailer to, did the check clear? And can you write me another check? And then so that's why I push for FinTech or ACH.
Yeah.
Some retailers just aren't going to do it, but we keep pushing.
Yes. Well, I think that's helpful for people to know if they're working with somebody that everybody's, happier with. That is less confusion if you have a retailer that you have a good relationship with, just
Mhm.
nudging them towards making that smoother.
Yes.
And I think the point about, right, making sure records match, I think that people are probably very comfortable or understand that how important that is for when it comes to doing like federal filings, or right, if you're talking about doing like quarterly report of operations or whatever, they know that the wording needs to be, letter perfect in all those forms. But the same goes here, because getting two different databases to talk, there's a chance for a lot of
Sure.
miscommunication, right? Even if you're something as simple as is the word "the" in front of, right? The word,
Yeah.
or is there a vintage number associated with it or not? Just making sure that these things are all entered the same way. If it's as simple as just logging into ABC and making sure that you just copy and paste the language over so that
Mhm.
you avoid trouble.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think, yeah, it sounds like some of these things you've probably encountered many of them. They're all avoidable, and just a little bit of training on the staff front probably um, can make these happen far less often. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
So I think that, we've covered a lot of what this looks like in practice. I think it's a great opportunity for wineries in Virginia. Um, there's a lot of advantages to it. Um, so from the winery perspective, I get why they would want to do this. For retailers, it's a great option to be able to source Virginia wines in ways that might be harder through distributors. For you, what does success look like? When things are working well, what does VWDC want to see?
Honestly, wineries that are figuring out this distribution model and able to grow their business and ultimately graduate. There's like 265 wineries that participate right now. And there are some that they only distribute a case a year, and that's their
Mhm.
perfect. They can do that if they want. Then there are others that they are actively trying to grow their distribution model, and the goal is, and that's when it was created. That's why the 3,000 case limit was put into play, because the wholesalers said, at that level, we're interested in picking this label up and taking it on to ourselves. And so, we're working together with larger distributors to help grow these brands so that they are able to graduate. And so I think that's the success that VWDC wants to see.
Yeah, yeah,
I, however they want to use it, it's there for them.
yeah. Yeah, it's nice it's got the flexibility, and that there's this is supportive of growth, and it supports the ecosystem overall. So it's a wonderful service, and hopefully more and more wineries will use it every year in evolving ways. Um, I can, if there's any other questions, please feel free to add them here. But in the meantime, Stacy, do you have any parting words that you'd like to share with our audience? I won't keep people long as we're approaching the lunch hour, but anything that you'd like the audience to know before leaving today?
I always try to stress to wineries that call to ask questions about the service. I always stress, start here. If you are interested in any way of exploring the distribution model, start with it's the safest place to start. Um, I've heard horror stories of wineries entering into a distribution agreement with a larger distributor, and then they're not able to get out of it. But VWDC is here to help them grow. And when they're ready to graduate, release is very easy to obtain, usually within 24 to 48 hours. So start here.
Yeah, that's great. And if anybody has questions, they can reach out to you if just about the mechanics of how this works.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Great. And if you want to talk about the strategy of your distribution, you can always, use the Virginia SBDC's craft beverage program. We're happy to talk with you about, how you want to build this into your business. So please use this as a resource. Thank you all for joining today. I really appreciate it. Staci, thank you for the insights.
Thank you.
It's very much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for
both. Wonderful information as always. I want to thank everyone too for attending today, and remind you that you will receive an email with a link to this recording. If you would like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. These resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. And we do hope to see you all at our next session. Take care, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.